Okay, good evening. Hopefully some of our people are able to connect. And we're going to be covering the land use regulations and construction chapter of your course. All right, so, and while we're waiting for a couple more people to connect, we've got a few more now that's joined us. I want to make sure that you know that our YouTube channel actually has really good exam prep information. We have people from all over New York State that they actually watch our videos in order to pass the state exam. And this is from other schools, I guess, where they feel like they have not been prepared as well. So they watch the playlist that's called Exam Prep. It says Home Inspection and Real Estate Exam Prep. So, of course, you only want to watch the videos that pertain to real estate. I wouldn't watch any home inspection ones. And I'd also recommend watching property management as well. Property management has some really good information as far as the fair housing chapter of your course goes. So that's something good to do after you've been in the program for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Of course, the program's 7 weeks long, so once you get to the halfway point, I do recommend that you watch a video called Trigger Words. And the Trigger Words video is really, really good. It's not so much a video, but it's nice because you can listen to it. It covers about 50 of the most popular terms. And what happens, people tell us they see all the time on the state exam, they see these terms that are asked on the state exam as well as the school exam. And what's nice is that you just want to make sure you know a few of the key words. And it's really important that you know you're not going to be able to memorize everything. So what happens is if you just know a few words, when you just hear a few words, you should be able to think of what the term is. And that really seems to work quite well. So I highly encourage you to watch the Trigger Words video and listen to it over and over again when you're getting ready in the morning, when you're on your way to work or on your way to whatever you're going to be doing in the next few weeks. Just try to listen to as much as often as you can, as often as you can. It's really going to make a big difference for you, okay? Okay, so we begin Chapter 5, Land Use Regulations. And one of the things I want to bring to your attention is a real important term called laches. So what you want to know about laches is failure to assert your rights in a timely fashion means that you might lose your rights as a result of laches. One of the things people tend to remember about laches is it's kind of like a statute of limitations, okay? Now, you don't need to know what the different laches are for different things. But as far as the statute of limitations goes, the only other thing that comes to mind that you might have seen already is that there's a 6-year statute of limitations as far as real estate contracts go. Hopefully you know that. And if you don't, make sure you jot that down right now. Always feel free to jot down information as we go through, because you never know when it's going to be a multiple choice throwaway option on the state exam or the school exam, okay? Sometimes people say they see things on the state exam and they don't remember learning about it in particular. And that's really common, actually. But what you're not going to be able to say is that the multiple choice options, you didn't see any of those before. And that's real common with state examinations, okay? So laches, failure to assert your rights in a timely fashion, means you might lose your rights as a result of laches, okay? The other thing we talk about on page 135 are deeds, okay? You want to know a couple important things about deeds. And first of all, you should ask the owner of the property when you list a property for a copy of the deed, to look at a copy of the deed. You'll learn a lot about the property that you're about to list when you look at the deed. One of the most important things you learn about the property is, are you dealing with all the property owners? In particular, if you have the most current deed in front of you. If the most current deed matches up with the property records as to when that property owner purchased the property, then you probably have the latest deed. The only time there'd be another deed is if the property owner maybe got divorced or got married, so added someone or took someone off, or if there was some kind of a subdivision of the property where they sold off some acreage, then you might not have the most current copy. So when you get a copy of the deed from the owner, if they have it, you ask them, is this the latest copy of the deed? You can go online. If you're in Erie County, New York, you can go to www.erie.gov Erie, E-R-I-E, erie.gov. If you go to erie.gov, that's where you have access to the online records for anything filed in Erie County, whether it's a satisfaction of mortgage, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a mortgage that someone took out on a property. I encourage you, if you live in Erie County, to look up your own personal record and see what shows up under your name. Anything you've ever done will be recorded there if it took place in Erie County. Not all arrest records show up there, but some things like that might show up as well. So I would also encourage you to pull up under erie.gov any properties that you list in Erie County as well. This way, any other transactions that might show up or will show up on the property, at least you'll be privy to that information, okay? So erie.gov, then you go to the Erie County Clerk's Office, and then you look at the online records. Now, there'll be lots of different codes that you might not be familiar with there. And that's okay, because there's a place for you to click on that website in order to see what the different codes mean. But for the most part, you'll see grantor, grantee. Of course, the people that you'll be dealing with will be the grantee because they received the property as a result of having purchased it from whoever they purchased property from. So the grantor is the one selling the property, and the grantee is the one that's receiving the property, and that will be the new seller, okay? So the deed. So as we look at the deed on page 135, you want to make sure that you know that a deed shows proof of the property, proof of ownership of the property. Your individual property owners can restrict the way land can be used by current and future owners. So if a landowner wished to place a restriction in the deed, so here's another reason why you want to see the deed. You want to see, are there any restrictive covenants in that deed? In other words, is there things that you can't do? An example of a restrictive covenant would be not being able to put up a fence, or not being able to park a boat or a tractor trailer, or having an above ground pool. Sometimes that's a restrictive covenant you might find. So it's shocking to me how many people list properties and they don't get a copy of the deed to review because there's so much information in there, okay? That really can affect the way you market the property, and it has information as far as what a prospective buyer would want to know about the property, okay? So I wanted to bring that to your attention. On the next page, we're going to take a look at the police powers of government. That's page 136, the police powers of government. The police powers of government basically is two big things. Number one, the way the government can control zoning. In other words, the way you use the property, using it in a legal way, and that includes getting building permits when you make modifications to a property, as well as making sure that those modifications were made in accordance with the law. So if for some reason the property, let's say that the work wasn't done in a workmanlike sort of way, then you wouldn't be issued what they call a certificate of completion, which means that the addition, if for example you had an addition put onto the property, it wouldn't be legally habitable based on the police powers of government and what the local government has a right to do to make sure things are done properly. And it's really for your safety, but it's not just your safety, but keep in mind, if your property starts on fire, for example, the neighbors' homes can start on fire as well. So there's lots more to it than just, what's the big deal if something is done maybe not so professional. It does matter because there's other lives that are at stake. And of course, the right for the government to tax you is part of the police powers of government. I remember on my state exam, and I do take the state exam, and most instructors do take it periodically just to know what's on there. And I'm just going to segue for a moment, and I want to let you know that if you go to our website, wnyschoolofrealestate.org, we actually have a place on there where you'll see exam hints and suggestions. You scroll down on our home page, you go towards the bottom, and you'll see in the numbered links 1 through 17, you'll actually see a place where we have the information as far as past students who take the state exam, and then we talk to them and they tell us what they remember seeing on there. Because the information on the state exam, New York's very confidential about. They treat it like you're essentially joining the FBI. They want to make sure that They don't want to give you any potential to know what you might see. And every month they have 2 exams that alternate, last that we heard. So I would suggest taking a look at that on our website. And of course, that's why we go through the program like this, and we share with you the most common things that we keep hearing about, okay? Because, you want to make the most of your time. So police powers of government was something on one of the exams I had taken about 4 years ago, just to keep abreast of what I'll see, what our students will see on the exam, okay? Another term I want to talk about on page 136 is ad valorem. So there's a few Latin words on the exam, or could be on the exam, and ad valorem is one of them. So ad valorem means according to valuation. So when you hear according to valuation, you should think of the term ad valorem. And that's what your property taxes should be based on. Your taxes should be based on what your property is worth. If your property is worth more, all things held equal, you would pay higher taxes on that, okay? That's all, nothing more exciting than that for you, okay? Another term you want to know is escheat. So if a person dies and they leave no will or no qualified distributees, the property might escheat to New York State. So it usually goes through the county, not through the state, but through the county, and it's a shame. You're cheating your heirs out of their inheritance and what you've worked so hard for. So by not having a will, and if you're not in touch with your relatives and don't have that will, and the people around don't know who a qualified distributee for your property is, it will escheat to the state. But that is a common state exam term that you want to be familiar with, okay? Also, I don't want to forget, at the bottom of 135, we have Article 9A. So Article 9A is part of the law, and you do need to know what Article 9A stands for. Article 9A stands for subdivision and development. That's New York's main subdivision development rules that we follow. Just like your main body of laws for real estate agents and brokers is Article 12A. That's something you should know. You would have learned that back in your license law chapter. You want to know that Article 9A refers to subdivision and development. Now that's usually enough. Usually you're not going to have to know more than that. But let's say you have an exam that's a little bit more difficult. And again, every month there's at least 2 different exams that there's a division in Albany that all they do is make exams for all the different occupations that New York licenses for. The most difficult thing you would run into with Article 9A is knowing when subdivision rules and regulations would kick in. And as we state in the book, those regulations would kick in upon the 5th carving of that lot. So what I want to share with you, it's really odd to do it this way. I'm so used to seeing everyone interacting. So hopefully if you're sitting there and you have a question about something, really don't hesitate shooting a message to us so we can respond to you, okay? Actually, there's a couple messages, so I'll check that in a moment. But every municipality is different. So let's suppose that you're not going to just work in Buffalo or one of the main cities of Western New York, and you're going to work maybe in Chautauqua County or Cattaraugus County. And what happens is when you work in some of the rural counties, the chance of you selling vacant land is much larger, much greater. As a matter of fact, selling residential property that sits on larger pieces of land is much greater. And some municipalities follow a more restrictive rule. That more restrictive rule for subdividing land could be that the counting of the splices or the splits of the land is every X number of years. Or they might not have started counting until the 1960s. I know when I sold real estate, 1965 was a popular year. So splits before that, they didn't count. They counted splits after that. So long story short, when it comes to Article 9A, and I don't want to get you all nervous and crazy over it, because your broker, the one that sponsors you, will make sure you know what you've got to know for the area that you're going to be selling real estate. And actually, he or she is the one that you should contact regarding any issues you have with anything that's a little bit unusual. But what you need to know from the program is that when you're dealing with large parcels and you're going to be selling off part of that land, maybe it's a house on 20 acres, and the husband and wife have been planning for their 24-year-old daughter that they were going to pay for her wedding by splitting off 5 acres of that in order to pay for the wedding at some point in the future. That might have been their master plan. It's not the most unusual thing you'd ever see. You need to ask that. You need to first of all check with that municipality where it's located. You go to the assessor's office. You go to the building office. It's different, and every town's different. As you get into more rural areas, they have more. They wear multiple hats, the different departments. So you want to talk, usually you ask the assessor and he or she will direct you to wherever you need to go to get the information. But you want to ask, how many times has this parcel been split? Because you don't want to list that 5 acres of land off of that 20-acre parcel and find out that a building permit won't be granted for that property. That's hugely important, and you won't ever be tested on that on any state exam. But what you should know about that is you'll be sued if you sell a piece of land and the people can't subsequently get a building permit some years later, because then everything's not going to be checked out necessarily, and things like this can be mistakes that a lawyer would make and not check to make sure, especially if they don't use a real estate lawyer, the buyers of the property. So, that's why when people say a lot of the things you learn in a 75-hour licensing course you don't really ever use, tell you the truth, there's a lot that you use. Believe me, there's a lot that you use. I can't even, I can tell you that maybe 15% of it I have never used. And I've been in the business a long, long time. But there's so much that you use when you think about it. So be careful when you listen to people outside the program, especially when you associate with an office and they tell you, oh, don't worry, it's just for you to pass the state exam. It's a lot more than that. Believe me, if you follow everything we talk about from cover to cover in our book, your chance of being sued drops exponentially. You'll be a much better real estate professional, and you do a much better job. So believe me, you don't want to disregard a lot of what we talk about in here and the extra suggestions we give you above and beyond. So let me take a quick look and see what some of the questions might be that have popped up already. One moment. So one question here from Emily is, what kind of different subdivision regulations or requirements are you looking for? The most important subdivision regulations, requirements that we're looking for is restrictive covenants, things that you can't do with the property. Like I would say that there's a subdivision off a transit road. I don't remember what it's called, but it's north of Maple and south of south of Clarence Center Road. And they have real strict subdivision restrictive covenants in their subdivision there. And you wouldn't know this unless the owner happened to tell you, and you can't always bank on the owner telling you everything. Sometimes people, I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but sometimes property owners don't know a lot about their real estate. Like they buy the house and they know their house, but they don't always know a lot about the intricacies of the real estate. And it's not their responsibility. Nobody told you to. You just have to have the money to pay for it and hopefully take care of it. That's all you need to own real estate, really. There's no IQ test for owning real estate. But it's really important that you know all the right questions to ask, things that can affect valuation of the property, long-term value of the property. A lot of things you're going to learn while you're on the job, but it's a lot of common sense too. If your property has any restrictions on the way you can use it, it diminishes the value of that to some degree. lot of restrictive covenants are in place because the subdivider who sets up that subdivision wants to make sure that they maintain the values for that neighborhood. So that's why when you go, you drive through, you don't want to see people parking their tractor trailers, and that people have above ground pools, that are visible from the road, or any of the other restrictive covenants that might be. And you could just Google if you want to see some examples of other restrictive covenants we haven't discussed. There could be parking, there could be restrictive covenants that control how many cars you can have at the property. It's kind of mind-blowing, some of the restrictive covenants in place. When you own a piece of land, you might not know this, but when you own a piece of land and you're developing it into a subdivision, you pretty much can set up whatever rules you want to follow as long as it doesn't violate the law. So that would be some examples to answer Emily's question. Let's see what else we have. That's a good question, by the way. Okay, hi, Gino. Happy to have you here. Here's a message from a question from Kayla. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. So what about if they don't have the deed? How much does it cost to get another deed? Okay. When you close on your property, there's different lawyers do things differently. Some lawyers kind of use that as an opportunity to lock you into using them for the next time you sell your property. And they tell you, we'll retain your records from the closing, and if you ever need them, just let us know. They'll be safe here. What that really means is that we really want you to use us next time we really want you to use us next time you sell your property, and hopefully for the rest of your life or until we're out of business, whichever comes first. Okay. I don't like that because sometimes, well, your life changes and you meet different people and you find out maybe either overpaid or you didn't have the best representation or whatever. Life can get complicated. So I'm not a fan of leaving my records with lawyers. I've bought a lot of properties over the years. But suppose they don't give you, they don't keep your records and they give them to you at closing. What you're going to get is your abstract of title, which is an 8.5 by 14 thick blue paperwork. It'll be thick. It'll be like a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick. And the title is a chronological history of everyone that's ever owned that property right back to the days of the Indians. The Holland Land Company is the ones that we see most often. So in there or with that, they'll often have a copy of the deed, which will be signed by the previous owner of the property, who is the grantor. Of course, that's all testing things you should know. You should know that the grantor signs the deed. The grantee, the purchaser, doesn't sign the deed until they become the seller of the property. Okay? So the deed would be often with that legal paperwork, along with the survey that shows the dimensions of the property. Now, it's nice to get a copy of the survey. As long as you're asking for a deed, you should ask for a copy of the survey as well. And the reason why is because this way you can look to see if there's any, well, first you can determine the square footage of the property like an appraiser would. I'm a state certified appraiser, and I always ask for a copy of the deed. It lets me compare the measurements to my little roller when I walk around the property. I want to make sure that, that they didn't turn the garage into maybe a family room or additional living space illegally. That's another whole topic to talk about. And I also like to know where the boundaries of the property are. In particular, when the property is not a rectangular lot, usually the frontage of the property, in a typical suburb like Hamburg or Amherst might be 90 to 125 feet wide and a depth of about 160 feet in length. Depth, we call that depth. So when you look at the tax bill for a property, it'll say, it'll say something like 120 x 200. So the first number is always your road frontage, the second number is your depth. And if you read a deed backwards, it actually, the last number on a deed will be the road frontage of the property. And you might say to yourself, well, what's the big deal with that? Why do I care that that's the case when I can just look at the tax bill? Well, sometimes when you're in a rural area, like in Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, or parts of Niagara County or elsewhere, you may have an irregular shaped lot. And you don't always know what is the dimensions of the various pieces, sections of that land. So the deed is helpful for that as well. And the survey is nice to compare it with. But sometimes you don't get a good survey either. Sometimes surveys, there's limited surveys, there's things called elevation surveys, which are used to help determine whether if you're in a flood zone, it helps you to know for sure if you're in a flood zone, and then you can take actions to get out of a flood zone. That's another topic. It's really easy to get off topic in a real estate course, okay? But all of it will come back, and we'll see those revisited again when we get to the appropriate materials. So I guess that's a really good thing about this, is it's hard for you to get me off topic because, well, obviously why. So, but anyways, so getting a survey is an important thing. But let's go back to his original question about getting a deed. So if they don't have a deed, you don't have to have them get a deed. But you should go on erie.gov and look up the basic information that shows up with the online records. If you're selling property in Amherst, Williamsville, Cheektowaga, any of the non-rural parts of Western New York, a deed won't be super important to have in your hands for the few times people won't have them. But interestingly enough, people will have them more than half the time. And just the fact that you ask for a deed and get it more than half the time, you're doing better than 200% of the people out there that you're competing with, okay? So instead of wasting a lot of time about how to get another deed, you shouldn't have to worry about getting another deed, but make sure you do your due diligence. And I would go so far, and I know this is above and beyond the material, but one of the things we really care about our students at the school, and we don't want you to just, we don't want you just to know enough to pass. Like, we want to make sure that you also stay out of trouble, minimize your chances of getting sued, and also want to make sure that you do a really good job and you're successful. It turns out you'll be in the business a long time and have a really good life. And maybe refer us people. We're always happy about that too. But more importantly, doing a better and more thorough job as a real estate professional will get you more referrals. And that's really important. You want to, I don't care if you're a janitor, or you're a painter, or you're a real estate agent, you really should do the best possible job you can do. There's a lot of mediocrity out there, and there's a lot of mediocre agents. The 80-20 rule in real estate is really, really true. In other words, 20% of the real estate agents sell 80% of the real estate. I wish I could tell you that 20% of real estate agents were superstars. There's even a big percentage of them that are mediocre, but they're still way better than that other 80%. So you always want to give it your all, and that means doing your due diligence. And where I was leading with this whole thing was this. We covered already earlier in the course, unless you just joined us because it's a modular program, we covered about the different disclosures that we make in real estate. You know, we talk about property and condition disclosure, we talk about agency disclosure. There's lots of things you talk about with people that you don't have witnesses or proof that you talked about it. And we're in a very litigious society. So what I would say to you is send an email after you do certain things in real estate. Like when you list a property, your broker will give you a checklist of here's everything you should do. When you walk around the property, the interior with the owner, and you're listing it, We covered, or we will be covering soon, a checklist of everything that's on the multiple listing profile sheet. It's really good to walk around the property, and when you're in the kitchen, ask, do all the appliances work? And then when that property owner says, well, the dishwasher doesn't really work, so we just don't use it. Then we have a thing in real estate. I was a national trainer for Century 21, so I'm going to share a little of this information with you as well. We have a thing called the assumptive approach. The assumptive approach is really helpful, and it doesn't go out of vogue at all. Like, this is something that's always in style with everything in life, not just real estate. You don't ask the property owner if they're going to fix it. You ask them to let you know when it's going to be fixed, because you don't want to give the prospective buyer any opportunity to have issues with the house. In other words, anything that's broke should be fixed. So you ask that owner, are you going to be getting this fixed, or do you have a plumber in the family that could maybe check it out, because we really don't want to have things wrong with the house. And you'd be shocked at how many people will just get it fixed. It's not an issue where you have to, like, it's an argument or it's a negotiation. The seller contacts you to help them market their property and get it sold for the most amount of money in the shortest period of time with the least amount of inconvenience. They should take your advice. That's why they're hiring you. Otherwise, they could go FSBO, for sale by owner. And that's why a lot of FSBOs they're not successful, because they don't know. They don't know everything that you're learning right now. What I'm sharing with you are things that not everyone does, or everyone thinks of, or they think is important, okay? So the assumptive approach is really important. You walk around that house, anything that needs to be fixed, painted, corrected, removed. If you're walking past the family chandelier in the dining room that was passed down from the last 4 generations, and they bring them, believe me, they'll tell you these things. Well, they will tell you if that's something that they are not including. If something's not going to be included in that transaction, you want to make sure that you have it removed ASAP. Have it replaced with something that's attractive, that will help sell the property. You don't want to tease buyers when they walk through the house and say, oh yeah, no, that's not included. Oh, no, that's not included either. No, because that turns people off. Just like things broken and things wrong with the house, that turns people off. Okay, so not sure how I got on that topic, but let me look at see what other questions we've got here. Okay, so the deed. So does it have to be between the 6 years to be sued? Okay, so Kayla had two questions on that. So the 6 years that I was referring to is anything that involves between buyer and seller that's in the contract of sale, or between the buyer and the lender. So we have, you might not know this yet, depending on how far you read ahead or whatever, but we have mortgagor and mortgagee. Mortgagor is the borrower, mortgagee is the bank. If you don't know that, please know that, because that's such a waste of a couple of points on the state and school exam. I would hate for you to lose those points, okay? So the mortgagor, if there's an issue you have with your lender, that 6-year statute of limitations would apply to you and the borrower, okay? The borrower and the lender, okay? And then any issues in the contract between the seller and the purchaser would also be 6 years, okay? It's the best I can answer that for you, okay? Let's see what else we have here. So Morgan, hi Morgan. What if they are dirty and they're hoarders? Wow, yeah. That's a good question. Let's see, how would I handle that? Sometimes my ideas involve a little bit of effort, okay? And we don't hear a lot about this, but sometimes sellers of a house you need to treat them like a buyer. And the way you treat them as a buyer would be to take them and show them homes in their neighborhood that are similar, that what we would call good comps, okay? And if you show them what a well-staged comparable home looks like, and you bring to their attention, notice that it's been decluttered. You might not know this, but we have, I don't want to segue too much, but we have a free home staging course. And one of the big thing about becoming a certified stager, either the free one we have, or become fully certified, that's another whole topic, is decluttering is a big, big thing in staging. People don't want to see your junk at the house. They want to see it clear. Buyers are not the way they were when I sold real estate. When I sold real estate, they would be excited to see a house of a hoarder or not updated and not staged, because they could see past everything. They could offer a low dollar amount and do all the work themselves. People these days do not want to walk into a house and redo everything. They actually want to walk in and do nothing. As a matter of fact, they hate, I think they even hate to unpack. If they could get away from unpacking, they probably would do that as well, if there was a way to do that, but there isn't a way to do that. So buyers today are very, they high maintenance, meaning they want no maintenance in a house. So I would say to you that showing your seller, who's a prospective hoarder, in your opinion, is a real good way to show them what they're competing with. Because all they're going to do is help the other homes that are for sale in their neighborhood sell, if they don't become more comparable by getting rid of the mess, okay? And then your broker is in a good position to help you with more ideas, because I don't want to take away from, you're not going to be tested on that at all. So, but I think that's a really good start for you, okay? So good question, Morgan, okay? Let's see what else we have here. So Craig, hello, Craig. We're happy to see you, Craig. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so Gino. Last question here is Brianna Jordan. Yeah, okay, so you're here. We're happy to have you as well. So let's just cover now. Again, I'm not going to go through every single page, because that's the whole purpose of why we sent you the other thing we sent you. I just want to bring some important things to your attention. And page 136, I want to share with you the important numbers you need to know for test purposes. And this is in the box that says real estate units of measurement. So you want to know what a link is. A link is 7.92 inches. That's just something you memorize, like that. That's it, 7.92 inches, that's a link. And a rod is 16.5 feet. That often shows up on the school exam. So 16.5 feet, you should know that. A chain is 66 feet. Please know how many feet are in a mile. Okay, so 5,280, 5,280 is the number to know for feet in a mile. And the other most important thing on here to know is 1 acre. So an acre is 43,560, 43,560 square feet. So if you have a rectangular lot, like the one we talked about earlier tonight, 200 feet depth. Of course, if you're looking at a tax bill, it would be frontage by depth, so it'd be 120 by 200. So it'd be 120 x 200. You multiply the 120 by 200, and then you get a number. So I'm just going to do that real quick for you here. Pull up the calculator on my phone. 120 times 200 gives you 24,000 square feet. Now we know that there's 43,560 square feet in an acre. So we know we have less than a full acre. But people who have anything that's equal to half an acre or more, they're very proud of that. I'm not going to lie to you. Like if they have a third of an acre, a half an acre, 3/4 of an acre, they will let you know, especially when you're walking around the property. They're not shy. They will definitely let you know. So we divide that by 43,560. We know that we have just over half an acre in that example that we keep using over and over again. So 120 multiplied by 200 gives you 24,000, and that turns out to be over half an acre. And doesn't that sound better than not talking about the fact that like it's over half an acre? Sounds like a lot, okay? Now, when you get out to the rural areas and you've got multiple acres, well, that's even better, you know. And then you want to make sure you also understand another thing too. And you're not tested on this, but gosh, I hate for you to go out in the field and like people say, what real estate school did you go to? Like, how do you not know this or that? So I'm going to share another thing with you too. And I talk about this from a perspective of being an appraiser and teaching appraisal courses. I set up all the appraisal courses for the State University of Fredonia back in the day when there was no licensing for appraisers, and then they passed it all of a sudden at the federal level. Should know the difference between a urban area, suburban area, and a rural area. You keep hearing me reference, you know, Amherst. Well, Amherst is suburban. You hear me talk about, you know, Chautauqua and Cattaraugus, and those are quite rural counties, but they have urban cities. You know, a city is an urban location, okay? And this is all important because, you know, when you're picking comparable sales, and we haven't got to that yet, that's chapter 7, you'll see that covered. We'll get to it though. You can't pick rural comps for suburban properties or suburban comps for urban properties. It's got to be apples to apples, oranges to oranges, etc. Okay. So, you know, if you're driving down the street and you see cows and barns and hay bales and you know, I don't know what they do with hay bales, but you know, you're driving down the street and you see this, you're in a rural area, okay? That's rural. If there's septics and wells, it's probably rural, but it could be if you have at least public water and septic system, you could be in a suburban area too. The town of Clarence, not too far from the school, they've got they have you know, that's considered a suburban area for the most part. But then if you go far enough out, Clarence, like East Clarence, heading towards Batavia, well, then you're getting to be more of a rural area, okay? But if you're near Transit Road, you're near, you know, some of the other ones I don't remember right now, well, then you're going to be, you know, most likely still suburban area. And, you know, when you have lot sizes of 30 by 120 or 19 by 110, those are typical urban area lot sizes. So you're going to find as you go around neighborhoods, you're going to learn a lot more about what's typical. Like one of the best things you can do as a real estate agent is start visiting open houses. Probably not like during COVID-19, probably a bad time. But when all this is over with, you want to start visiting open houses and getting to know neighborhoods. Because when you start listing properties, people in neighborhoods that you're listing properties with will know when you don't know the neighborhood. And if you don't know the neighborhood, your chance of getting the listing drops exponentially. So it's good to learn as much as you can about a neighborhood as you can, okay? So just to wrap up that topic, any city is an urban area. Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Jamestown. I think those are the big cities, okay? Western New York, Rochester, you know, if you go that far east. Suburbs are the municipalities that are immediately surrounding and adjacent to an urban area. So you got West Seneca, Cheektowaga, Clarence. You've got first, second, and third ring suburbs as well. So Hamburg is considered a suburb. Orchard Park is considered a suburb, but Colden would be considered a rural area if you're really following like the proper rules, you know. And one thing, like I'm a review appraiser as well, so I've reviewed many thousands of appraisals over the years. And sometimes to push value, like if you're trying to get a higher value for a property, and let's say you're in Colden, you might use an Orchard Park comp. And that's a real bad thing. It's a very unethical thing to do. You don't want to do that. Sometimes you do things like that as a real estate agent. You don't even know that you're doing something that's unethical because you don't know any better. But if you knew, here's a circle of life, if you knew the neighborhood better, then you would know that you shouldn't use Orchard Park as comparables for Colden. But here's a great thing about real estate. There's no black or white. Welcome to the world of gray, lots and lots of gray. Matter of fact, you'll be very gray after 10 years of real estate, but that's another story. So when you're in real estate, there's always a catch. There's like always like the one little extra rule or exception that could apply. And here's an example of that. There's many in real estate. If you have a property in Colden, but you're on the border of a more suburban area compared to the outskirts of Colden, and you use a comp from Orchard Park, but it's on the outskirts of Orchard Park, so it almost feels rural, then it might be acceptable. But I would surely never use the village of Orchard Park comparables for a two-story farmhouse in Colden with 20 acres. It would just be wrong all day long. I just couldn't even, it would have to be such a great explanation as to why that would work. It would be mind-blowing, actually. So, okay, so some more questions came in, so let's see what that's all about. So Emily, is there a good chance we are going to be finding the acres of a property on an exam? Do you get to use a calculator for the stater? Yes. So you do get to use just a basic calculator. You cannot use your phone as the calculator. So don't bank on your phone, okay? You can use a regular solar, basic, not too many buttons type dollar store quality calculator, okay? Because the little old lady who's like 90, I think she's 95 now, at the Department of State that will proctor you, she makes sure that it doesn't look like you can store information in it that you can use later on, like some of the programmable calculators that they have out there. So you want to make sure you just use a basic calculator. It's got to be real basic, okay? And yes, there's a chance you'll see acreage on there. As a matter of fact, if you were able to ask questions in real time as compared to having to text them over, I would say to you that, like, here's a typical question you might say to me. Why do we have to know about a rod and a link? This sounds like old-fashioned real estate. Okay, you might not have known that, but I'll pretend you said that. If you're looking at an old deed that hasn't had where it stayed in the family for generation after generation, you're going to see weird old-fashioned terms like rods and links in a deed. So you're going to have to convert that information over in order to come up with the information to put in the profile sheet for when you list that property, okay? So yes, there's a reason why you should know that. Now, of course, between you and me, all you have to do is go to our friend Google and type in how many feet are in a mile if you don't remember that. But unfortunately for state exams, you've got to know some information, and that's one of the things that shows up frequently, okay? So yes, you need to know that, and there's a really good chance you'll see it. Great question, Emily, yes. So let's see what else there's to know. Okay, so I want to talk about page 137 at the top of the page, special assessments. Real popular state exam term you're going to see. When you look at a tax bill, you would think that it would say, you know, it lists like fire district and town tax, this tax, and light, and I said lighting district or water district or whatever. It says all these different districts and little codes that make no sense, right? And then sometimes it just has like a weird code that doesn't exactly say special assessment, because special assessments are taxes that are assessed to various sections of a neighborhood that benefit from improvements that were made to that neighborhood. All right, so if there's curbs, sidewalks, things like that that are put in that neighborhood, so that neighborhood benefited from those items, then you have to pay a special assessment. But here's the funny thing about special assessments, okay? And I don't know if it's like this in every state. I really only know New York well. They're really bad, and I hope you're sitting down. I hope you're sitting down for this. New York's really bad at taking off a special assessment once it's been paid off. So when you, a matter of fact, I would tell you that my history of doing this for lots of years, we usually have 3 to 5 students a year that will like email me and say, "Oh my God, Mike, you won't believe this. After I sat through your class and we talked about special assessments, I actually found out that I had one on my property." Now, okay, now here's a question. How do you know you have a special assessment? Well, you don't. You have to take your tax bill to the town hall where you pay your taxes, and you have to ask them, is there any special assessments on my property? So here's a WIFM moment for you. You might say, what the heck is a WIFM moment? WIFM. What's in it for me and why do I care? WIFM moment is anything that can not only help you personally, but actually might help you as a real estate agent to do a better job. That special assessment could be for curbs that were put in that neighborhood 30 years ago. And it might only be $6 or $8 a year. But after 30 years, it's a bunch of tax money. And that surely would have been paid up by then. So I challenge any of you that pay your tax bill to just take that extra 10 minutes and call the municipality and say, hey, can you tell me if there's any special assessments on the property that I just paid my taxes on? And like I said, 3 to 5 people a year tell us, because I'm sure there's only 3 to 5 people that probably ever even call and do this. A lot of people don't take my advice. I don't know why they don't. And it's like, okay, it's fine if you want to take it. But it turns out that it was a special assessment, and it was for something that should have been paid for, because special assessments should only last. If I don't say this, I know Emily will ask this question. I'm just kidding, Emily. How long are they for? I don't have it. It's just another great part of real estate. It's not forever. It's usually somewhere from 6 to 12 years, is what I've heard over the years from experts. Okay, so so the chance that those curbs were paid for a long time ago probably really, really good. So the WIFM moment we've got out of this, besides saving yourself $12 or $50 a year, whatever your special assessment is, if you happen to have one on a property that you purchased, keep in mind some of you will own rental property that might also have special assessments on it too. You just don't know. Is when you list a property, owners don't know if they have a special assessment. How do they know? And even real estate agents don't even know. Who should know, right? So when you list a property, you should pick up the phone and call the municipality and say, are there any special assessments on this property? There's actually a place to put that information in the profile sheet that most agents leave blank. They leave it blank because they're very mediocre. Welcome to the world of real estate. So I just challenge you to don't be mediocre like all the people you're competing with. Be a superstar in real estate, and you'll see it gets you much farther. You'll be much more successful, and people will refer you business, and then you won't be killing yourself years later because people will be referring you so much business because you're thorough in detail. You'd be shocked at where you'll get the referrals from. You'll get referrals from lawyers that are like, wow, this person really knows their stuff. They really care. They really follow up. They say they're going to do what, isn't it sad that these days you have to be excited when someone just does what they say they're going to do? And that's true. It's really the case. So special assessments, that you never expected all that information. Know the definition. It's very frequently shows up on state exams, okay? And anything that you want to know about assessments on properties, it's covered in the second paragraph there. ORPS, O-R-P-S, stands for the Office of Real Property Services. That's the name of the state office, and you're not usually tested on that, so I wouldn't go crazy, but it's something you should know as a real estate professional. Office of Real Property Services is the state entity that regulates anything to do with properties and assessors and assessments and things like that. So you can find out a lot of information by looking at that website. I wouldn't spend the time, after you get your real estate license, that's when you can spend time and look at things like that, okay? The bottom of 137, I want to talk about building permits. A lot of people think that when they buy a home, they have the right to do whatever they want with it. Obviously, you shouldn't use it as a meth house or whatever. I don't even know how you use meth, but you can do legal things with your real estate. Can't always run businesses out of your home. Depends on the business, but when you own real estate, you actually have some limitations. And one of the limitations is when you make improvements to the property. And this is a real touchy subject. When you walk into a home and you go into the basement and the basement's finished, if I only see one way to get in that basement through the stairs inside and one way to get out of that basement through the stairs that I just talked about, it's probably an illegal modification of the home. This is a huge problem all over New York State, actually, but in Amherst, the agents talk about it quite a bit. And you are not the police. You are not the real estate police. Okay. A lot of people think that if they finish their basement, it's not a big deal, especially if it's just an optional area for the kids to play, or it's a man cave where you just kind of hang out to watch football games or whatever, have a little me time to get away from the family. But it's a big problem. There's a lot of people have died around the country because they go in their basement and they fall asleep, and there's a fire, and of course the fire occurs right at the foot of the stairs. The only way to get out of the basement, it actually would be my kind of luck. I have that kind of luck. It wouldn't happen anywhere else except right at the foot of the stairs. And and you die. You die if you can't get out of a fire, right? So smoke usually will do you in. So. But a lot of people, they talk about building permits like they think, okay, well, I can put a new window in, or if I replace the stairs with a similar size or exact same stairs but new. That used to be a rule for quite a while. I remember that when it used to be the rule. About the only thing you can do now without a building permit is paint. But then there's even another rule. I regret to tell you, there's it's called an RFP rule. You'll see that in the book as you go through it. I think it's under the environmental chapter. You can't even paint your own place if the home was built prior to 1978 and there's potential for lead-based paint, because you have to complete a course if there's a certain number of square feet more that you're painting than what it allows for, and it's not very much. So, long story short about building permits, every time you apply for a building permit to do anything, It'll be recorded in the local municipality. And it just turns out the main reason why people don't go apply for building permits, either number one, they don't know, although they usually know, but they don't, they say they don't know. The other reason is they don't want their assessment to go up. It's no mistake that we're talking about this right after we're talking about assessments and things. You know, it's just, it's not a coincidence. Okay, so they don't want their assessment to go up because, you know, if you go to the building department and you say, I'm gonna, you know, put in a new kitchen and I'm gonna put in new windows, well, that makes my house worth more, and if my house is worth more, then I probably will be assessed for more, which means I'll be paying more in taxes. And I'm probably not telling you anything that you're shocked about right now. But our problem is if we're selling a home with an illegal modification, like a finished basement that only has one way to get out, and I'm talking about no escape windows, you know, because not only now the law has changed again. It used to be that only in bedrooms, if you had proper escape windows where a human could actually fit through, not like a small human, but an average grown adult, that you that was acceptable. Now it's an escape window in any finished area, because you could fall asleep in the living room or the basements. We usually call them a rec room, family room, living room. Those are above grade rooms typically. Okay, so so it's just all a big mess, and it goes beyond the realm of what we're even supposed to talk about in the class, other than what you've heard me say already. The best way for me to tell you to handle this is talk to your sponsoring broker and ask them how to handle it. Matter of fact, I would say to you, you know, I kind of think it's fun. I'd like to turn things around on people. Like, you know, when you go to interview to find a broker, let's say you don't know who you're going to work for yet. So you're going to interview hopefully 2 or 3 brokers and see if you have a good fit. We have a page in your book that says how to pick a broker. I think it's page 79, somewhere there. And it gives you all the suggestions on what you should ask as far as, you know, what's optimal, you know, tell me about your office staff and this and that. But I'd like to turn the interview around where you interview that person a little bit, not just them interviewing you. And what I'm saying is that ask them some questions like, hey, Mr. Broker, prospective broker to hire me, what happens if I list a house and it has a finished basement, and then I check at the town hall and see that they never got a building permit, and I know for a fact that it's an illegal modification? What should I do? And then see what they tell you. It would be very interesting to see how the answers vary. But what's more important is not only what their answer is, it'll actually be impressive. They'll be impressed that you even have such a good question, because, you know, most new people, when you hire a new person, especially a real estate agent, you just kind of like, they're like sheep, and you just kind of like, okay, just follow along, you know, you just do what you're told. And, you know, like when push comes to shove and you have problems in real estate, and, you know, dealing with buyers and sellers, this is the person you're going to have to lean on. So it tells you a lot about their intelligence, their character, their how they're going to interact with you. So I challenge you to ask them questions about. I challenge you to ask them questions on problems that you're going to run across, and see exactly how they respond. How would I solve this problem? What should I do? Because in real estate, when you do something wrong, it turns out you get sued along with your broker. You always want to keep your broker in the loop so that they can't turn around and say that they didn't know, because they're supposed to sponsor you, so they should know what you're doing. But sometimes they try to like, oh, I didn't know, you know. So so to get back to the building permit thing, just know for yourself at least that you can't modify a basement without getting a building permit. If you list a property that has a finished basement and or anything that was done, if they turned a garage into a den or a bedroom, it's going to be a problem. It'll get caught. One of the ways I learned this the hard way years and years ago is I had buyers come in from California, and something about California buyers was they always checked everything out. It's almost like, do they all take a real estate course? I don't know if they do or not, but they always seem to check things out. I only had 2 or 3, but boy, they really stuck out in my mind. And they want to know, like, and really, when you think about it, that's what you should do. You shouldn't buy a house and just believe that your real estate agent did everything, because you don't have to do everything. I think you should do everything, because I'd rather you find problems before you're 3-4 months into it and the deal falls apart. What a waste of everyone's time. But it's nice that when you purchase a home for yourself, I hope you never purchase a home the same way again after taking this course. I hope that you do what we call due diligence for yourself and see if building permits were obtained for everything new in the house. Because if it wasn't, here's the thing that happens. I know Gino's probably wondering this, because Gino said, I really like the live classes. I can ask questions, although I don't see him asking a lot of questions. I'm actually giving him a hard time because I like to be funny a little bit. I'm not always super funny, but I figure Gino's probably, it's bugging Gino right now that the fact that what happens if you don't, let's say you just, you know what, I don't care the basement's finished. I'm gonna buy the house, I don't care it's finished, I'm not gonna even use it as a finished basement. So you close on the property, you got that basement finished, and then you get a great job offer 2 months later, double the salary, but it's in Texas. So now you got to put the home on the market. And guess what? You have just inherited that problem. Now this problem is your problem. It's not their problem, because the people you bought the home from, turns out they moved to Europe. Not easy to sue people who took the cash and they're gone. So this is why those people, I think, from California, they must all take a real estate class. This is the reason why I think they check everything out very thoroughly, and you should too, because you inherit the problem when you don't do due diligence and make sure that whatever you're buying is legal. Okay. We have a couple questions. Let's see what the questions are. How exciting is this? 2 questions. Let's see. Oh wow. Okay. Kayla, you're asking a lot of questions tonight, so let's see. What if they don't have the deed? Okay, we did that. 6 years. Do they give you your money back for the 36 years? Or how? Oh, yeah. No, they don't give you the money back. No. Yeah. No, I mean, I never heard of that, tell you the truth. But I've never, yeah, no. No. Yeah, sorry. Her question is, I'm assuming I'm reading this right. If you pay a special assessment for an extra 36 years, do you get that money back? And in actuality, depending on whether you've been paying it all those years or not, it probably was paid by the previous owner for a period of time too. And yeah, no. But they take it off. They take it off, which is nice, you know. But yeah, no money back. Great question though. That is a good question. We don't get. I think of all the questions I've had over the years, I never get that question. Oh, here's another one. Let's see. Oh, see, Gino's asking questions now. Okay. What if it's exterior stuff, like a new roof or landscaping or driveways? Okay, so landscaping, usually a building permit's not required, but it depends what your definition of landscaping is. If your landscaping includes retaining walls, which are structural in nature, then it could be a building permit item. A new roof, absolutely, all day long. And then the really fun, and by fun I mean horrible, not fun, when you get a new roof, you've got to prove that they've got all the insurance. And it turns out that the people who have all the insurance and do everything right charge you the most amount of money because they're doing everything right. So if you get a really good price on it, they're probably not doing everything right. And then you're even less inclined to want to do all this right. Believe me, I know too many people that do too many things I don't want to know that they do. So long story short, yeah, you can pretty much paint the exterior of your home that was built after 1978. So just as long as we're talking about things just on a bright note, it's very minimally bright, but it's a bright note. You should know the definition of target housing. Target, T-A-R-G-E-T, not Target the store, but target housing, which is any home that was built prior to 1978 that might have lead-based paint, because that was a year that they outlawed the use of lead in residential paint. It was 1978. And I'm talking about that because we're talking about doing illegal work to a house, but paint isn't illegal unless it was built prior to 1978. And then you have the RFP rule that you can Google if you want to look it up before you get to it in the book. All right, I need to proceed because we're running out of time. Please know on page 138, the definition for Article 78 at the top of the page. And Article 78 proceedings, you're going to definitely see it on the school exam. You might see it on the state exam. Article 78 proceeding is a judicial appeal. So if you know if you hear the trigger word judicial appeal, you should think to yourself, Article 78 proceeding. So now you got Article 9A. It's, a good way to learn information is to lump it together, okay? So I'm checking our time real quick. We're doing great. So you have Article 9A, subdivision and development. Article 12A, main body of laws for real estate agents or brokers. Article 78, judicial appeal. So when you hear the word appeal, you think of Article 78. If your real estate license was revoked by the state and you really believe that that should not have happened, doesn't happen all the time, so don't get excited to think that this fixes everything. That's the proceeding. The Article 78 is the proceeding that lets you go the next step in order to determine whether or not a higher authority will review that decision by the Department of State. Okay? The other thing you don't want to forget is that the Court of Appeals, is the highest court we have in New York State. If Francesca is still with us, I know that you'll never forget that one. That's one we talked about in class before. Okay? Second paragraph, we talk about variances. So when you want to make a revision, to your property, like let's say your neighbors are really, really annoying, and you want to have your fence instead of 6 feet high, 10 feet high. You have to first check and see what the zoning allows for. And of course, the zoning won't let you go 10 feet because that's what you'd like to have. You need to apply for a variance. And the variance it's a hardship because you need more privacy, okay? But if they say to you, no, you can't do that, then you can appeal that, and you probably won't get approved either. The next thing you apply for if you can't get a variance is a special use permit. So special use permit is not as good as a variance because a variance lives forever and stays with the property. It's permanent. Special use permit expires at some point, and often upon transfer of the property, it will expire. Okay, so always try first for a variance and then a special use permit. And everything I just said, you want to know exactly that way. And it actually turns out that it's very practical information. It's not like it's good stuff to know in real estate. It's like what we call the meat and potatoes of real estate. Okay. But now I know Gino's probably, if he's still with, he's still with us. Gino's probably wondering about what's the whiff moment? What's in it for me? Why do I care about variance and things like that. And I want to bring something to your attention. It's really, really important. You won't be tested on it, but it's so important that I just don't want you to not know this, okay? Anytime you list a property that has in-law quarters, okay? In-law quarters. It's like, to me, it's a horrible concept, but I had a divorce and it's a bit, you're doing, okay, forget. But when you list a property with in-law quarters, you want to find out from the owners who you're going to be listing with, did they get a variance or a special use permit? Now, every time I have you ask the owners questions, you know I'm still going to have you verify that information with the municipality, because I don't want to say that the owners will lie to you, but they might not tell you properly. Maybe. So when you verify with the municipality, you want to find out, is it a variance? And will the right to keep this as in-law quarters stay with it upon transfer, or upon transfer, does the in-law quarters, the rights to have that cease? That's super important, because when you list that property, you can't list it as in-law quarters if legally it can't continue that way. That's your responsibility as a real estate agent to verify that. Okay? So please know that for all practical purposes. That rule is like the whole state. It's not like a Western New York rule. It's an all over, it's actually a nationwide, pretty nationwide uniform thing. Okay? The bottom of 138, we talk about some federal regulations as far as environmental items are concerned. When you hear CERCLA, stands for Comprehensive Environmental Response, Cleanup, and Liability Act, we're talking about environmental regulations. We're talking about the fact that if you buy property and next door there's a garage, it maybe fixes cars, maybe it's a gas station, they might have, the tanks might leach and get into your property, the one that you care about, the one that you've listed. This is one of the reasons between you and me, I would never buy a property that's next to a commercial property like that, because I don't want to deal with all of that drama of potential leaching or issues like that. You know, if it's an office building and I know the history of it, maybe, but any other type of use, I'd be very suspect of. I would not want the property if I could avoid. There's so many properties available. Have to be something really special about the one I'm looking at to like want to take the chance and still buy the property. Okay, you always want to do due diligence to make sure that there was no environmental issues, because that's another thing that you inherit if you don't do due diligence. It's a phase 1 environmental audit. Okay, phase 1 environmental audit. There's 4 phases we talk about that's coming up. You don't want to buy a property that's got environmental issues, because then you inherit that problem unless you discover it during the phase 1 environmental audit. SARA is the other federal legislation that also involves contamination of property. Stands for the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act. And if you really want to get depressed tonight, Google Love Canal and the Superfund, and that will, if COVID-19 hasn't depressed you, that will definitely put you, well, you shouldn't really leave the house. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more. Okay, so page 139. Talk about wetlands. And what you want to know for test purposes about wetlands is, the most common state exam question about wetlands is, what governmental agency deals with wetlands and regulation of wetlands? And it's going to be the DEC, as in Department of Environmental Conservation, or the Army Corps of Engineers. It's the most important things to know about that. Okay. Again, we're not going to go over. We don't want to read to you. When you come to school, we want to highlight the important things. And again, you have a very detailed recorded item to go through that you should be. I might actually sound the same way. You might actually, you hear my voice and you might be like, wow, he said the same exact thing, because that's when we teach it kind of like the way it is. So I don't want to repeat everything. It'd be horrible for you, but know those two things is really, really important. Okay, and then in the middle of page 139, we look at the different environmental phases that you heard me talk about in an environmental audit. And the one thing you don't see super clear here that you can write in yourself is phase 4. Okay, so let's look in the middle of page 139. You've got phase 1, which involves no digging. You don't dig in phase 1. It's more your investigation into the history of the property. So, you know, if it was owned by, you know, Mobil Oil, okay, then, you know, I'd be a little suspect that something was going on maybe there, you know, as compared to the public library, you know. So phase 1 is the investigation. And you see phase 2. Phase 2 environmental impact study, research is conducted, actual collection. So we have phase 1 is the investigation. Phase 2 is a collection of the material to have it tested. You know, that's digging up the soil. Okay, phase 2 is digging up the soil. Phase 3 is remediation. So that's like dealing with the problem. This is how we're going to make the land not contaminated anymore. And then phase 4, which you don't see here, but you're going to write it in. You don't see it because you're not tested on it a lot, but, you know, I kind of decided, I made an executive decision. I want to share this information with you. The phase 4 part of the environmental impact study is your plan to make sure it doesn't happen again. So phase 4 is your plan to make sure that the environmental issue that was at the property won't be repeated. Okay? The bottom of 139, we have fast facts. As you go through your book, you want to make sure you know all fast facts, all broker fast facts, because when New York added the 30 hours to make this from 45 hours to a 75-hour program, when New York made those changes, they basically took everything from the broker course and they dumped it into the salesperson course, and they only left one thing out. And that one thing that they left out was office management. Okay, so we almost tell you that if you touch every page of this book and do everything we tell you to do, your online practice questions, you watch the DVD that you're given, you listen, you watch the YouTube playlist for exam prep that we have, you do the crossword puzzles, chapter end questions as well. You read the material that we've covered in class on your own. You touch every page of your book. If you do that, you're not going to have any problem at all passing the state exam. And the online practice questions, where you've got a ton of questions that's above and beyond what's in your book, and they're different. They're not all different, but they're mostly different. You will have no problem passing. You probably could pass the broker exam too. So at the bottom here, you see certificate of occupancy. And I just want to share that with you, because when you get a building permit, that gives you permission to build or do a modification to a property, make some kind of a modification to a property. A certificate of occupancy is the local municipality putting their blessings on, saying you made the changes in accordance with the law and the way you said you were going to do it, and it's safe. You shouldn't move into a property if it's new construction and a C of O, or certificate of occupancy, wasn't issued. That's one of the most common things. So here's another thing. It's like, you know, you do this long enough and you feel like you've seen everything, and you still haven't seen everything. One of the most common things we see um, when people purchase a home, especially if they're only the second owners of it, is that sometimes the certificates of occupancy are missing because they got early occupancy because they closed on the property in the wintertime when certain items couldn't be signed off on by the municipality, and then it got lost in the shuffle and people forgot. So when you do your due diligence, whenever you list a property, and it turns out whenever you sell a property, so when you're working with the buyer, you know, we talk about this in agency. This is like the circle of life in real estate. You have a fiduciary responsibility to put above and beyond everyone else's, including your own, everything that pertains to a seller when you're representing a seller, and everything to a buyer when you're representing a buyer as a purchaser. So you want to put all of their interests above and beyond everyone else's, including your own. And part of that is to make sure that this is what I do. Okay, the average agent doesn't do this. Mediocre, you know. I verify that there's no issues with the property for my buyer, because how am I not putting their interest above and beyond everyone else's, including my own, if I didn't do that? Call me crazy, but I really believe that that's really important. Okay. You might find out that there's a C of O missing, and then that can cause a problem later on for your buyer. You know how much a buyer will appreciate you finding something like that out? When, you know, typically you think a lawyer might find that out, but people don't always use real estate lawyers. They often use a friend, someone they get a bargain from. You know, like you don't hire Celino and Barnes to help you do a real estate closing, you know? So, but anyways, on the page that follows, we see an example of what a certificate of occupancy looks like. It was way back when I, one of the first properties I ever dealt with in real estate. And we've got questions that follow. And we're just going to cover a little bit of construction. And again, tonight was not meant to go through every single item because you were given that information already. I just wanted to help, you know, bring this to life a little bit for you. Obviously, with everything going on, we want to give you the best possible experience that we can. So we talk a little bit about construction, and there'll be more again next time we talk, which will be tomorrow at 7:30. You're not expected to be an expert at construction. You know, I often think of this chapter as, you know, when you go buy a car and you have the car salesperson say to you, I don't know anything about cars. I don't know about engines and this and that or whatever. And, you know, when they don't really know a lot about a car, it makes me not so excited to spend $30,000, $40,000 or whatever, you know, you spend on a car these days. Kind of feel the same way about a house, you know, like you kind of should know stuff about the construction of a home. You know, like you're selling someone's most important asset. And for you to not understand some key things about a house is sad to me, you know, in my professional opinion. So we talk about there's carbon monoxide regulations. We have the property condition disclosure form. That's all the top third of page 142. As a matter of fact, the land that the house sits on, we call that a site. That's at the end of that first paragraph. The site is a piece of land developed in such a way that it's ready to be built upon. We walk around the property, and one of the first things you should typically do, I know that we have home inspection classes, and we teach our home inspectors it's very important that the property have good topography. The topography is the way the land lays around the house. And you want to make sure that it swales away from the house because you don't want water ponding at the foundation. That's not good for the foundation. As a matter of fact, water that ponds at the foundation, we call that hydrostatic pressure. And the hydrostatic pressure is what causes cracks around the foundation. And nobody wants cracks in their foundation because then you get cracks, then you get water, and you leave it alone long enough and you'll end up having a degradation of the structural quality of the home, which you don't want to get in all that. It's just A house with structural problems is not a home I ever want to own. It's how should it move, you know? And that's what happens when you have structural issues with a home. So that's kind of what we talk about in that whole first paragraph. We talk about the foundation. So we break the home into two categories. We have the substructure and the superstructure. The substructure is the foundation. It provides support for the superstructure, which is the structural framing of the home. The structural framing of the home, everything you can't see because of the siding and the sheathing on the walls and the roof, all that covers it up. We often call that exterior of the home the building envelope. The building envelope is what keeps out the snow and the rain and the wind and the elements, okay? So you want to be familiar with the foundation of the home. You want to know like the items in the bottom couple, 3 paragraphs. Like rebar, for example, that 3rd paragraph from the bottom. Metal reinforcing rods. That's what you would put on one side of your flashcards. Metal reinforcing rods. And then on the reverse side of your flashcard, you would put rebar. The state likes to ask you about rebar. I know it's not exciting, but it's something they like to ask you. In the item that we sent you, there's some really good construction components that are the little subset videos that we give you. So make sure you watch that carefully. Very, very helpful. Okay, so we talked about a lot of these items already. Common foundations are made of poured concrete block, stone and brick, and there are stone and brick. If you go, Clarence has stone and brick foundations, Jamestown has stone and brick foundations. I mean, you name it. Really old areas will have stone and brick foundations. And it turns out those houses haven't fallen down. Things were made really good way back in the day. But there's a huge problem with stone foundations, which is radon. Odorless, tasteless gas that comes from the breakdown of uranium in the soil. And those foundations lend themselves to having huge radon problems. And it just turns out that Clarence is a hotbed, especially Clarence Hollow. That's a part of Clarence that's closest to Main Street. It turns out that huge radon problems there. And radon mitigation systems can cost $1,500 or more, thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the home, and whether it's an active or passive system. But that's all more than you need to know. I just like to fill it in to help give you a good, solid, homogeneous understanding of the material. You should know pier and beam foundation along with concrete slab foundations. That's described at the bottom of the page. The next page, 143, we talk about concrete slab foundations. The perimeter is supported by a concrete slab, and throughout the center with concrete beams made of poured concrete and steel in the ground beneath. Talk about floating foundations. You want to know that mat and raft foundations are also known as floating foundations. Please know that for test purposes. It's the easiest 2 points you will ever get. It's 1.8 points, but it's close enough. Mat and raft foundations are also known as floating foundations. Next paragraph, the concrete for the footings and the slab, they're poured separately in floating foundations. If you take a home inspection course, we get into lots more detail on that information. Foundations made with a single pouring of concrete is known as monolithic. Guarantee you'll see that on the school exam. Sometimes you do on a state and sometimes you don't, okay? Under the did you know item, just a practical thing, because when you get your real estate license, turns out people think you're an expert in real estate. When people hire you to come to their home and list their home, they don't say, oh, you just got your license so you don't know anything. No, they assume that if you're there, you pretty much know everything you need to know, even though you might not feel that way. So you really, really want to make sure you get this. Memorize the book and you'll be an awesome real estate agent. I guarantee you that. Really, it's not that much to have to know for your career. Think about it like that. Like, lots of people, they get their degree, they take all kinds of different courses, and they don't use a lot of that information. You really use a lot of this, especially if you practice real estate the way I recommend. Okay? And then you're always continually learning. So I challenge you, when you go home, well, you're home, look in your basement and look at some of the different things that we talk about in this chapter as far as the construction of your home. Hopefully when you look in your basement, you don't see that it's finished without a building permit, but that's another topic, okay? But what I was starting to talk about here, though, and we're going to be done soon. I know you're probably looking at your watch saying, wow, this is so late. I'm sorry. Under the did you know, 95% of water problems that people have at their property come from improper or lack of guttering. Gutters that discharge too close to your foundation, lack of gutters, compromised gutters, splash blocks that are non-existent or compromised are also triggers for water problems at a foundation. And so correction of gutter issues really fixes a lot of your problem. The problem is, here's why home inspectors exist. Because people don't maintain their homes. If you maintain your home, you're not going to have big things to fix. Because little things turn into bigger things. And it's a lot, the one sad thing about concrete is concrete cracks. Adding water to that equation increases the number of cracks, the length of cracks, the width of cracks. And then we've got the constant freeze thaw, year round, year after year, decade after decade. It really beats the you-know-what out of our foundations. So it's important that gutters are in place, even on garages. That's one of the most common problems I see with garages is lack of gutters. But we have gutters in place that are intact. That's a phrase we use, intact, that also are connected downspouts, that are connected to splash blocks so that it's diverted away at least 12 to 18 inches minimum. 2 feet is better, but sometimes you don't have 2 feet. But the more, the better. That's what you should look for. And when you don't see that, I guarantee when you go in the basement in that same exact spot where the water discharges above, that's where you're going to see, you'll see the color of the wall will be different, especially if you flash a flashlight on that area. The color of the wall will look a little different, that concrete wall, or it'll be damp. Or if you use a moisture meter, you'll get a higher reading there than when you go here. Okay? Which is not your responsibility to do that, but I don't just treat this course like, let's make you a good real estate agent. I treat this course like, I want you to take care of your house, because someday you're going to sell your house or you're going to buy a house. And what better way to, you get the most bang for your buck out of a $475 course to take better care of your own home and make better decisions in the future, even if you never get a real estate license. Okay? We talked about the superstructure at the bottom of 143. I want to bring a couple important things to your attention before we wrap up for the evening, and then I'll continue again tomorrow. Okay? Rafters, the top of your page. Rafters are that angled portion of your roof, and rafters that extend past the wall. At the end of the rafter, we have the gutters. You want to know the difference between fascia and soffit. The fascia faces your face, okay? The fascia faces your face, but it's blocked by the gutter. So you want to be familiar with that. The soffit's a part where you got to look up underneath. And the soffit often closes off the rafters that extend past the wall area of the vertical wall area. And it kind of keeps the critters out from going inside, but it provides ventilation, because a roof that's not ventilated is a roof that's going to lose up to 1/3 of its remaining economic life. Ventilation is very important. It's something we look for as home inspectors. And it's something you should look for as a homeowner. But you're not responsible to look for that as a real estate agent, I'm happy to tell you. Also, at the bottom of that picture, you want to look for the sill. The sill is the lowest wood framing member of the house. Please know that phrase for test purposes. The sill is the lowest wood framing member of the home. Those are some of the most important terms for you to know on your picture here. But take a look at all the different terms there. And then tomorrow we'll talk about different home styles. And let me just check, see if there's any more questions before we wrap up the evening. Looks like we do. Okay, just one question here. It's Emily. Who pays for this extra research and cleanup? Oh, Emily, trying to think about what you mean. Who pays for this extra research? Oh, okay. So she added. Emily, I'm happy you're still here. So the buyer of the property is the one that pays for that. Kind of like the buyer pays anything that you're going to benefit from, you pay for. So the seller wouldn't benefit, although the seller may have got an environmental audit on the property from a previous sale or from when they purchased the property. The only problem you run into when you don't pay for that research is you can't hold them liable always, because there's paragraphs in there that state that we're not responsible, and a lot of engineers are really good. I hope there's no engineers in the class or lawyers. They're really good at having phrases to protect themselves, and one of the phrases is, we're not responsible to third parties or anyone other than the client. So that's the only risk you have, is if the person that did the environmental audit, so yeah, usually the buyer would pay for that. They benefit from it. Okay. So thank you for the questions. This was terrific. This wasn't bad. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to jot down any questions from the material we sent you earlier. Make sure you text our text-only number for questions that you come up with in the meantime. You can text that 24 hours a day, and you should get responses usually the same day or early the next day. So have a great night, and thanks for your participation tonight.